Trent Alexander-Arnold is at the center of a bit of a positional controversy. Obviously, with the recent qualifiers with England, he was deployed against, was it Andorra, in the center of the park in center midfield. And then Jurgen Klopp obviously had a little bit to say, as he normally does. And I'm just going to read a quote before I let you go on with this. And Jurgen Klopp said, "Why would you make the best right back in the world a midfielder? I don't understand that." There's two things that I want to touch on in that quote. Is he the best right back in the world? And also, what do you think the benefit of having him move into centre mid for Gareth Southgate is?
I think he is, because I don't know how much competition there is in that position at the moment. He's only the best attacking right back in the world. I don't think there's really much doubt about that. I mean, he's recorded 35 assists already in the Premier League. He's one of the youngest players ever to do it, and he's a defender. I think the only players to get to 35 assists in the Premier League at a younger age are Rooney, Giggs, and Fabregas, off the top of my head. So, I mean, that's good company to be in when that's not even your primary job. But the thing is, at Liverpool, he doesn't really play right back. Not in a traditional sense. And he's talked in interviews quite openly about wanting to redefine the position, which, I mean, good on Trent. He didn't come through as a right back. It was only the position that was available in the first team due to injuries at the time. That's where he broke through. He was actually a number 6. He played in midfield all through his junior career. And Liverpool have begun to use him in much more interesting ways than you would usually associate, a defender who is basically playing a 180-degree game. It's right up and down the line. You're only playing in one direction of the park. It's mainly a physical role in most senses, but for Trent, it's completely different. He comes inside a lot. There's this triangle they've been working at the start of the season with Liverpool. It's been really interesting with Harvey Elliott, sadly injured in that Leeds match horribly. But he's been terrific, drifting out to occupy the space that Alexander-Arnold has just vacated. Alexander-Arnold actually comes into more of a number 8 position and plays on the inside. And then if Salah comes inside, then Elliott and Alexander-Arnold can swap back, and it causes all sorts of issues for the defensive markers. So he's already occupying a playmaking role for Liverpool. The reason it might make sense for England to try it is because they have way too many right backs, so much so that Southgate has fielded up to 3 of them in the same 11. You've got Kieran Trippier, Reece James, and Kyle Walker, all vying for that position as well. And it's meant that Alexander-Arnold's defensive frailties have come under a lot of scrutiny from the pundits in England, because they're trying to separate these 4 players vying for ostensibly one position. And he's been subject to everything from Rio Ferdinand telling him to go back to basics, to Jamie Carragher going on this, I think, really condescending routine on one of his punditry gigs, where he actually stood up and tried to demonstrate how Alexander-Arnold wasn't bending his knees enough while he was jockeying his marker. That's the kind of thing that if you play in midfield, you're never subjected to. Kevin De Bruyne never gets that kind of criticism. So it might actually seem quite inviting for Trent to switch positions so he doesn't have to put up with that crap. But, at Liverpool, the fullbacks are already relied upon for more creativity than the midfield 3, who are mainly, pressing machines. So it doesn't make sense to switch there. For England, it might. He didn't seem to quite know where he was supposed to be against Andorra, but I think it's worth experimenting with, given that England don't have much depth in midfield, aside from destroyers like Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips.
I think it's an interesting way that you described it. It's a 180 game for a right back, and then it's 360 for a player in the midfield. I remember in my long and decorated career in Churches League making that shift from right back, to the middle of the park, and there's just a lot more to think about. And in no way am I comparing myself to Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm dog shit compared to him. But I know for me how difficult it was to try and take your positional learnings from right back and apply into the center of the park, because it doesn't always translate, does it? Sometimes they're just things that you don't experience. There's parts of the pitch you're not aware of until you make that change. How long do you go on with an experiment before you go, maybe a player is not capable of making that shift?
It's a really interesting question, and I'm not sure what the answer is, because in international football, you don't get too many chances to experiment. The games are quite few and far between, and a lot of them are qualifiers with something riding on them. So it's only really against minnows like Andorra, where England's virtually assured of a victory, that Southgate feels comfortable enough to deploy him there. But England really, beyond Alexander-Arnold, need Jude Bellingham to really kick on and become a world beater if they're going to win the World Cup next year. And his signs during the international break were really, really positive. But I don't think it makes any sense for Liverpool to try it, because they've already got options in those positions, and no one even comes close to Trent's role and his interpretation of that role at right back. So Southgate might try it a few times. I think it will be quietly retired, like many other England national team experiments, with putting a non-specialist in out of position just because you think they can do a job. This is a long and storied history of this, of course. I mean, you go back to Sven-Goran Eriksson playing Wayne Bridge on the left wing, or Paul Scholes, getting shunted out of the centre of midfield by Gerrard and Lampard. They always do this. They always try and shoehorn players into the wrong roles. So I think Southgate will be cognizant of that kind of unwelcome history on that front, and will not want to be made a fool of by his sort of experiments and fancies, especially when he's being ridiculed by managers like Klopp.